This is the audio lecture for Chapter 4 out of the Nye text, Technology Matters. And the chapter title this week, as always in the form of a question, is How do historians understand technology? How do historians understand technology? And in the previous chapters, as I have explained before, and as you have experienced in your reading of them, Nye has not given very clear or explicit answers to his own questions that form the titles of the chapters. At the beginning of Chapter 4, on the very first page of Chapter 4, he does give what is a pretty clear summary or summation of the how he feels or where he falls on the questions of the previous two chapters, Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. He states that technological determinism should be rejected and that one must admit that technology is fundamentally unpredictable. So in that first page of Chapter 4, he rejects technological determinism and says that technology is fundamentally unpredictable or not able to be predicted. So that sort of provides a bit of a transition into Chapter 4, where he does really answer the question that he's posing, because he talks about a number of different ways that historians understand technology. And this lecture is going to be going into a little bit of detail about some of those ways that you will then, of course, subsequently read about in Chapter 4. So this chapter, Chapter 4, deals primarily with the history of technology. That is the central idea of this particular chapter, both going into some detail on the historical details of a few different forms of technology, as well as, and probably more so, talking about how is the history of technology written, or how has the history of technology been written in the past, and what are the methods used by historians of technology. And so there's three main concepts that Nye talks about that I'll review here before going into each of them in some detail. And the first of these ideas is that technologies are socially constructed, what is called the social construction of technology. The second of these is an idea that is known as technological momentum. Technological momentum. And then finally, the pair of concepts of the internalist approach and the contextualist approach to technological history. Now, the contextualist approach, of course, we have encountered before a couple of weeks ago in our chapter related to technological determinism, and both contextualism as an approach taken by historians and technological determinism will make a little bit of a return this week as we explore these ideas. And then the internalist approach is a new one that Nye is introducing as a particular way in which historians understand technology. So these are the three main ideas or core concepts of the chapter. The idea of social construction of technology, technological momentum, and then the internalist versus contextualist approaches to understanding technological history. Before I proceed to talk about each of these three core concepts in some detail, I want to take a moment to talk about and elaborate on the idea of the artifact. This is a term that you probably have heard before, and it's a term and a concept that Nye introduces early in the chapter, on I believe the first page of the chapter, and he mentions the fact of artifacts, and it pops up again a few more times throughout the chapter. And so, as the pertaining to the purpose of these little introductory lectures, I want to make sure that everybody has an understanding of what an artifact is, for those of you especially that do not have a previous understanding of what an artifact is. Now, the term artifact is one that comes from the field of archaeology. It is in the practice of archaeology that this term and concept of the artifact was developed, and from which it was borrowed in this discussion of technology. So, what is an artifact? Well, an artifact is any kind of an object that has been produced by human craft, that a human has created through what are basically technological means. And a little bit more abstractly, an artifact is any product of human conception or human agency. So anything that a human or a group of humans came up with the idea for and acted to create or make a reality. And so there is particular ways in which artifacts can be understood. You maybe have heard the term or the usage of the word artifact in terms of historical artifacts. That is one way in which the term is used on a regular basis. And so what historical artifacts are objects from the past that are studied by historians, often in the context of things like museums, um, that have a great many historical artifacts of, old objects that are things that people used on a daily basis in their daily lives and so forth. You sometimes will also hear of technological artifacts, and these are artifacts that have a specific relation to technology or to the history of technology. And we might label anything an artifact. Artifacts do not have to be simply from the past. They can be present day, current things that we may label as an artifact. And basically, by labeling it as an artifact, what we are doing is saying that this is an object of study. If we take something that we have today, like our cell phone or our computer, and we're going to sort of study how it works, study what the meanings of it are, and just basically have it as an object of study, we may refer to that as an artifact. So the first core concept that Nye talks about in Chapter 4 is this idea of the social construction of technology. To say that something is socially constructed means that it exists by virtue of the social interactions among people. And one of the key ideas here is that even when we have a physical object, such as a gadget or a technological object, even when we have that physical object or physical item, there is still associated or attached to that, or maybe underlying that, an idea of what that object is and what that object does. And that idea of that physical object is what is socially constructed. Every thing that we have particular ideas about what it is, what it means, what it does, and it's these sorts of things that are socially constructed and that exist only by virtue of the social interactions that we have amongst one another. The meaning of a cell phone, for instance, as a means of communication and as a means of the many other things that we can do on smartphones now, is something that we understand in the context of what we do with and in connection with other people. And so something that is socially constructed is something that doesn't exist outside the context of human social behavior. Our idea of what a cell phone means and what a cell phone does, that idea doesn't exist outside of the context of the social behavior that humans exhibit when we are using cell phones or whatever other piece of technology that we may be talking about. Now, the actual physical object may still exist outside the context of human social behavior, but the idea of what that thing is and what that thing does not exist. So two of the things that are prevalent when we're talking about the social construction of technology are meanings and design. And in each of these areas, there is a variety of possible meanings, and there's a variety of possible designs for a technology. Different people at different times and different time periods and different cultures may have different meanings for a technology. And the way that a particular technology evolves may cause it to have a different design in different areas of the world. The one example that Nye talks about in relation to this is the evolution of electrical systems in different parts of the world. The electrical system evolved in different ways technically in America in comparison with Europe. Even today, there are differences in voltage and current and the type of plugs that you use to plug in things for power, for electrical power. And these are differences in the design of that technology. And the fact that there are different meanings that a technology can have and different designs that a technology can have in terms of the physical manifestation of it are all things that point towards the social construction of technology. And so, if technology is socially constructed, that means that it is not technologically determined. Social construction of technology is an idea that is one that is sort of against the idea of technological determinism. It's more on the contextualist end of the continuum and is an idea that is one that is not necessarily similar, but sympathetic with the idea of contextualism as an approach to technology. The second core concept that Nye talks about in Chapter 4 is this idea of technological momentum. Technological momentum. Now, this is an idea that is not original to Nye, but one that he borrowed and got inspiration from another scholar named Thomas Hughes, which Nye mentions in the text. He talks about this as being an idea of Hughes's, but which I say now just so that you understand that this concept is not one that Nye himself came up with. And so technological momentum is a form of momentum that a technological system has after it has become established enough and successful enough. And before offering more of a definition of technological momentum, I want to just take a moment to sort of explain or remind you, if you probably may know already, what momentum is. Momentum is a concept from physics in which a particular object has enough force and enough velocity that it sort of keeps going even after it is going. It gains force and velocity as it is traveling, and as it gains momentum in that way, it becomes very difficult to stop or to change the path of, to um, divert onto a different path. And so, this idea of technological momentum is the momentum achieved by a technology when it has accumulated enough investment, it's become established, and has accumulated uh, so much investment that it becomes difficult to halt or to redirect. And when I'm talking about investment here, I'm not talking strictly about financial investment, although that would be a part of the investment that we're talking about here, but a broader concept of a variety of different things that are invested in a technology. And when there's so much that is invested in it, that makes it hard to change the basic structure of that technology, or to, stop its momentum. And some of the things that are invested in a technology that has technological momentum might be technical specifications. There's for most technologies that are new, a lengthy process and a lengthy period of time in which competing technical specifications are adopted by different parts of an industry, or different users or creators of a technology, and eventually the technical specifications become standardized. This, for instance, is what happened in the electrical system, electrification in the United States. Common voltages, common sorts of plugs and so forth became standard for anyone and everyone that puts in electricity into buildings. A great many people become invested in a technology as well. Employees, as it says here, whose livelihood depends on the manufacture or the continuance of a particular technology. A bureaucracy that exists, that is created for the regulation of a particular technology, or just the administration of a technology. Again, in terms of the example of the electrical system, there are bureaucracies in terms of inspecting electrical work. There is bureaucracies involved with the certification of electricians, and the education of electricians. And so there's an involvement and investment by a great many different organizations as well. Governmental or quasi-governmental organizations, universities and other nonprofit educational organizations become invested in a technology, and then businesses. Businesses for whom the creation and maintenance of a particular technology is what their purpose for existing is. So all of these things become invested in the technology and make it very difficult to stop this technology, or to create drastic changes to it. So, this idea of technological momentum is one that is sort of between the poles of technological determinism and contextualism. It's not completely technologically deterministic, because there's a lot of social aspects involved with the idea of technological momentum, but neither is it completely contextualist in nature. It does allow for some ways in which the technology shapes various aspects of the society, and that's really the core of the concept of technological momentum, is that a technology gains momentum and seems like it is inevitable, or maybe is unstoppable, and so it has some elements of technological determinism sort of mixed into it there. And that's what Nye is talking about when he uses the term soft determinism. It's not full or pure technological determinism, but there is some elements of determinism that are mixed into the idea of technological momentum. And so technological momentum, in terms of that continuum that we looked at a couple of weeks ago, with technological determinism on one end of the continuum and contextualism on the other end, falls somewhere roughly in the middle of that continuum. Now, that's the same position on the slide from a couple of weeks ago that was labeled neutrality. Now, just because technological momentum and neutrality are both in that middle area of the continuum does not mean that they are synonymous with one another. They simply occupy that same sort of middle area between technological determinism and contextualism. Contextualism makes a big return this week in the chapter, and Nye talks about it this time in connection with the idea of internalist history, or an internalist approach to the history of technology. In this phrasing that I use, which I don't believe Nye does use directly, of internalist versus contextualist, does not mean that these are two opposing ideas in the same way that technological determinism and contextualism is, but that they're complementary ideas, and that a particular historian working in the history of technology would choose one or the other, either internalist approach or a contextualist approach. And it is in that sort of usage that I use the term versus here between the two. So an internalist approach to technological history is one that looks at factors that are internal to the technical development of a technology. In other words, the factors involved in the invention of the technology, who were the people involved, and what were their roles in the invention of the technology, what problems and solutions did the people who worked on the technology face, what was the actual technical evolution as the technology was being perfected, or the details of the materials used, the way in which those materials were put together to create the particular object or the particular technology, or the challenges faced by those who were working on creating or perfecting in a technical fashion the particular object or the particular technology. So the term internal means inside the process of the creation and refinement of a particular technology. And so just to remind you again what the contextual approach is in comparison with the internalist approach, a contextual approach is one in which the person, the historian or the scholar, studies the different conditions and the different contexts into which technologies are introduced. So once everything that an internalist historian looks at has been accomplished, the technology has been invented, it's been refined in terms of its technical aspects, what are those conditions into which that technology is introduced, and how do those different contexts and different conditions affect the further development of the technology. And this is sort of this shift from looking at a technology first according to an internalist approach and then according to a contextual approach is something that Nye talks about in relation to the history of automobiles. And so there's 4 key technologies that Nye talks about in Chapter 4, and they are the bicycle, the automobile, electrification, and the internet. And I'm not going to go into the same kind of detail as I did last week with 4 of the key inventions that Nye talked about, because what he does in Chapter 4, what Nye does in the chapter is he actually goes into quite a bit of detail about the particular historical details of the development of each of these technologies. And he uses these 4 technologies, each of them to exemplify a particular one of the concepts that he's discussing in this chapter. So he uses the history of the bicycle as an example of the concept of social construction of technology. He uses the automobile as an example of internalist history of technology. He uses electrification as his main example in explaining the concept of technological momentum. And then finally, he uses the internet as one of his main examples in terms of um, talking about how the contextualist historical approach works. And so these 4 technologies are at the center of Chapter 4, especially in as much as they serve as examples of these 4 different concepts that Nye is talking about in the chapter in terms of how historians understand the history of technology.